Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hi, I'm Flight Lieutenant Chris Sully, and welcome to the latest RAF Inside Air podcast. In this episode, we'll get the thoughts of the Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wigston, as he comes to the end of his 4 years leading the Royal Air Force.
I am, of course, pleased that we have a government that recognises the utility of air and space power. We've seen increasing acts that give us cause for concern. Countries like Russia and China behaving recklessly, destroying satellites, causing debris fields, fielding anti-satellite weapons. That makes it very clear that we are going to have to increasingly focus on protecting our critical national assets in space, our critical infrastructure in space, if you like. What was most frustrating for me during that period was that while all that public commentary and critical commentary was going on, the Royal Air Force was delivering a phenomenal operational output, whether that was facing the Russian invasion of Ukraine, whether that was in the Middle East, deployed to the far side of the world. Day in, day out, the Royal Air Force was delivering on operations, but none of that cut through when we were being criticised in the way we were. As usual,
we'll reheat a few stories which might have slipped under your radar, but first, see if you can identify what this noise is. Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wigston is approaching the end of his 4 years as Chief of the Air Staff. Inside Air has taken the opportunity to catch up with him in his last few weeks to talk about the challenges, successes and frustrations of the role. From the integration of the F-35 as a shore and carrier-based platform to COVID support in Op Rescript, from Op Pitting to providing support to Ukraine, it's certainly been a full-on time, as he told Squadron Leader Peter Lisney.
Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wigston, thank you for being on Inside Air. And I guess you're a listener.
I am indeed, Peter, and actually, I'm not sure I was part of the inaugural one, but I certainly remember doing one very early on in the series, and I enjoyed the process, and so it's quite nice to, as I near the end of my time, to have another opportunity. Thank you.
Well, yes, it was just a few weeks after we were born as a podcast, and so it's great to have you back, and thank you for coming back, because you did promise that you'd come back.
I know my diary's got in the way quite a lot as well.
So you're coming to the end of your time as head of the Royal Air Force, and we thought it would be good to take a look back at this time in office and talk about the people, technology and operations. So let's start with the operational scene. And can you tell me how that has changed during your time in office?
Well, it's been quite a remarkable progression over the 4 years I've been chief. When I took over in 2019, we were clearly involved on Operation Shader in the Middle East and Levant, tackling violent extremism and tackling people who were actively planning and had the ability to commit atrocities on the streets of the UK and our allies. So a really important role for air power and an important role for the Royal Air Force in that. And at the same time, we'd had a steady drawdown in Afghanistan. We still had people and aircraft operating there, but it was at a fraction of the scale of a decade previously. So it was a steady picture in 2019, and I look back over the 4 years now with what happened with the evacuation from Kabul, Operation Pitting, which was a remarkable couple of weeks period that in some respects came out of nowhere, but we understand the circumstances that led to it. But in terms of planning for that operation, that was very, very rapid and executed amazingly well by the people involved. And then at the same time, doing all of that support for the UK and the UK population through the COVID-19 pandemic. Everything from emergency care, helping with the vaccine rollout, helping with the logistics, supporting local communities in so many different ways. Again, a massive mobilisation of our people, again, which our people did brilliantly. And then over the last year, of course, we've seen the threat from Russia that we've been watching over the last decade. We saw it manifest in that brutal and illegal invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. And from that moment on, our absolute focus has been on keeping Ukraine in the fight, bolstering NATO defences, working with our allies, making sure that we're doing everything we can so that Ukraine will prevail and Putin and his illegal invasion attempt to conquer territory by force will fail. So that has driven all of our operational output, or the vast majority of our operational output, over the last 12 months. But there's another operational theatre that's ongoing as well, and that's in space. And again, in the 4 years since I've been chief, we've seen increasing acts that give us cause for concern. Countries like Russia and China behaving recklessly, destroying satellites, causing debris fields, fielding anti-satellite weapons. That makes it very clear that we are going to have to increasingly focus on protecting our critical national assets in space, our critical infrastructure in space, if you like, and working out how to protect it and, if necessary, defend it. So across air and space domains, we have seen this remarkable uptick in demand and operational tasking and superb operational output by everyone involved from the Royal Air Force.
If we look at the work that's going on to support Ukraine and Rescript, where we worked very closely with our sister services, there's a lot of the Royal Air Force is dependent upon its relationships, both militarily in the UK and with our allies and partners overseas. How have you seen those relationships with partners change over the last 4 years?
Well, as CAS, I see that as a really important part of my role, and whether that's with international allies or whether it's with the other frontline commands, Strategic Command, the Army and the Navy, internally to defence. This is a really important part of what I do as chief. Take, for example, the Navy, the Royal Navy. We've had many decades of rancour, frankly, over the carriers and how they'd be operated, and whether or not the Royal Air Force supported the investment in that capability. In my view, there was no question about how much we would lean into it, and I was as invested in the success of carrier strike, of carrier air power as the First Sea Lord is. And he and I, and so it's Admiral Sir Tony Radican, now the Chief of Defence Staff, but when he was First Sea Lord, he and I made sure that we took every opportunity to stand next to each other and say how close the relationship needed to be, and that by working together, that was us investing in the success of the UK carrier capability. And when you look at what what HMS Queen Elizabeth achieved with 617 Squadron embarked in 2021, with the deployment all the way out to Japan during the pandemic, with all of the challenges that brought, the success of that deployment, the success of the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy working alongside each other, again, that's something I look back on and with a fair amount of pride that we've achieved something that I can't think of another armed force in the world that will have done it as successfully as we have done with the introduction of the Queen Elizabeth class and the Lightnings. But I think on the international side, the events in Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine, the way that NATO and the way that NATO air power has come together to work together as one homogenous force from night one of Russia's invasion. We had combat air patrols up from the Baltics all the way through to the Black Sea. The RAF at times has been operating Typhoons in Scandinavia, and Typhoon and rivet joint Voyager tankers all the way through the Black Sea and into the Mediterranean, right alongside our NATO allies, and bolstering that NATO that NATO response to Russian aggression. And it was air power that was NATO's manoeuvre force in those early weeks. It was air power. It was the very overt demonstration that there would be a high price to be paid for any escalation or expansion of the conflict beyond the borders of Ukraine that enabled NATO to demonstrate its resolve. And it was air power. It was combat air patrols, as I say, supported by air refueling, supported by all of the enabling supporting units, command and control, the radar units. All of this was an enormous effort as an international effort by the alliance. I also look at what the Royal Air Force has done to enable the inflow of supplies, lethal supplies, rations, medical kit into Ukraine from Brize Norton, helping other nations contribute as well from other bases in the UK. And again, it's a massive international effort where we have stood alongside our allies. Over the last 4 years as well, we have broken ground on some remarkable international strategic partnerships. For example, the joint squadron with Qatar, which is now operational and was deployed successfully for the air policing in the World Cup. So that's 12 Squadron, a Typhoon Squadron, which has got Qatari Air Force people, Royal Air Force people working side by side with a quite remarkable and historic arrangement with Qatar. And then just recently, I was in Japan with the Secretary of State signing the agreement underpinning the global combat air program alongside Italy and Japan. We're going to build the next generation of combat aircraft that, for the Royal Air Force, will replace the Typhoon from the late 2030s. It is a remarkable trilateral partnership. It will last for the majority of this century. It will bring our air forces, our three air forces, closer together. Our industries, our aerospace industries, will work ever closer together. And it is a strategic partnership between the three nations in every sense of the word. And it's an enormously significant moment for our Air Force looking to the future.
Let's have a think about post-Herrick. We were told that we're going into contingency ops, and you've just explained all the operations that we've been involved in, so heavily involved within the last 4 years. How has that stretched the Air Force and its people?
It has undoubtedly stretched us, and there was a point in the summer of 2022 where I looked at the Typhoon Force in particular, which had been really carrying the load in our response to the invasion of Ukraine, coupled with continuing operations on Shader, other demands on the force. And I felt that was a force that we had really pushed, and the operational demand was starting to tell. And so it's something that we monitor very, very carefully. I am of course pleased that we have a government that recognises the utility of air and space power. I am pleased that we have a significant operational demand, that our operational tasking reflects a government that wants to be active on the world stage as a problem-solving, burden-sharing nation, and that it sees the role of air power in that as a way of being able to act on the world stage. That the speed, the range, the precision with which we deliver effect, and at times when necessary we deliver lethal effect. It points to the utility of air power, and it points, and in a way that I am very pleased to see, it points to a government that understands and values that utility and values its Royal Air Force as a result.
I imagine one of the challenges that you face as Chief of the Air Staff is balancing the need to procure new aircraft and develop and stay current, along with managing the other aspects of the Air Force in terms of infrastructure and the people and the offer.
Yeah, that in a very succinct question and that you put there, Peter, that pretty much sums up my job. Ultimately, I have an unrelenting operational demand signal. I have probably more tasks than we've got the capacity to deal with, coupled with an absolute obligation to build an Air Force that is fit for our successors, to pick up, operate, if necessary, fight and win with. And balancing that delivery today with building that force for tomorrow is it's the core element of pretty much every big decision I make. And we know that we've got issues with things like infrastructure. We know that we need to do more to demonstrate how much we value our people and how much we value what they produce day in, day out. And we need to show that, and we need to invest in making that easier for our people and making them even more effective and efficient and productive.
I'm going to just interrupt you there. Yeah. 2 years ago we had that chat, and episode 6 it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I asked you about heating and hot water in the blocks, and you said fixing the heating and hot water is the price of entry for Astra. And has that bill been paid? Yeah,
well, I'll come to your question in a minute, but I think it's probably worth me explaining what I meant by that, and I still stand by it, is that at the time, relatively early in my time as CAS, I wanted people to be interested and excited about Astra, about the part that I wanted everybody in the Air Force to play in building the next generation Air Force. I wanted people to see it as an obligation, and I wanted them to be empowered to think about all of the amazing things that the Air Force needs to become in the future, and whether that's in space or automation or remotely piloted platforms or artificial intelligence, all of those things we have to be thinking about today. But I was also acutely conscious that if I was talking to a room full of people that hadn't had a hot shower that morning, or had been freezing cold all night, or were living in another transit block because their block had been condemned, then I had an audience that was not predisposed to giving me their trust and trusting me to talk about building a future Air Force in a convincing way. So that's why I described it as heating and hot water is the price of entry for Astra, and I still stand by that. And we've still got work to do. Now I can look to some of the successes, and in saying that, I'm acutely conscious that there will be people listening to this podcast who will not have had who will have not have had the accommodation, or are not in the accommodation we would expect them to be in even now. But I look back over the last couple of years, some of the modifications we've made to buildings, which means that if there is a failure of heating, we can put on an emergency boiler really quickly, which has meant that the number of occasions when people have to move out to transit accommodation has significantly dropped. We have got a massive program of reinvestment. I mean, if you go up to Lossiemouth now and see what is going on up there, for example, that is now happening. And I am taking money, and I'm still taking money out of our equipment program to top up the infrastructure budget to the tune of 100 to 150 million pounds a year that comes out that would otherwise be spent on equipment and aircraft and the systems we need to get to operate. But I'm putting that into infrastructure instead, and it was something my predecessor, Sir Stephen Hillier, started, and it's something I've continued. The state of our infrastructure now reflects over 10 years of underinvestment, and it's not something that we can turn around overnight. There just isn't the capacity in our building sector, in our construction sector, let alone our ability to get through the planning and and all of the other things that go into this sort of work. But we will get there, and we've got a programme that will take us to the end of this decade, but we will be in a significantly better place than we were in 2019 by the end of this decade.
That's good to hear and reassuring. I think to the credit of our people, they've demonstrated resilience.
Yes.
What has impressed you most about our people? Our people, regulars, reserves, uniformed, our civil servants, and our contractors.
Well, above all, I cannot speak highly enough of the way our people have delivered on operations. And the shining example of that must be what people went through in 2021 with Op Pitting, the evacuation, almost no notice evacuation from Kabul. In the most difficult, harrowing circumstances, our people showed enormous skill, bravery, compassion, all the way through from the people securing the ground in Kabul all the way through to the reception centres back here in places like Brize Norton. It was humbling to watch how people stepped up for that, and it is whilst just a snapshot in time, to my mind, sums up everything that we stand for and everything that we can take pride in as a service, and I certainly take pride in being part of a service that's capable, that is humans that are capable of that level of performance, courage, professionalism, and compassion, all rolled into one. I look at the amazing work that we did as a service alongside the Navy and alongside the Army during the lockdowns, people out there in communities wearing our uniform with pride and helping people at really uncertain time, helping people get tested, get vaccinated, getting stores in the right place. And again, the resourcefulness and the resilience of our people, it cannot, it clearly got the attention of the public at the time, alongside the other emergency services and healthcare. But again, it just speaks to the adaptability of our people, and so it is that operational, that thread of operational service to the nation, service to our people, our population, and our allies, that time and time again just leaves me just in awe of what our people are capable of doing. The other thing that I am delighted to have seen, taking one step away from the operational environment, is the way that we have got an Air Force that is absolutely focused on the future, where innovation and people feeling empowered to think differently about how they go about their day-to-day jobs, think about how they can contribute to building the next generation Air Force. That's something that, again, I'm delighted to see, and it's something that we know we have as an organisation. The history of the Air Force is about being disruptive and innovative. That's where aeroplanes came from at the beginning of the 20th century, and translating that into the 21st century, using Astra as the channel for that, but but actually just at local level now seeing the product of people's innovative problem solving and at times disruptive approach to the challenges we face. It's brilliant to see, and again it speaks to the talent and the quality of the people who join our service or work alongside our services as civil servants or contractors. The regulars, the reserves, every part of it, and I'd even go into the Air Cadets as well. Some of the things we're seeing there in the next generation of people contributing to society. Again, it speaks to something very special that I think is distinctive about the Royal Air Force, and it's something that anybody that wears this uniform needs to pay attention to and be very proud of.
Or has worn the uniform, because
Indeed.
we speak to people that have in industry that have formerly been Air Cadets, and they're really proud to tell us of their experiences.
Yeah.
So next year is the 100th anniversary of the formation of the Royal Auxiliary Air Force, and the terminology is somewhat interchangeable to auxiliaries and reserves. In the late 30s, our auxiliaries were part-time and they're learning to be pilots. An awful lot of our pilots who fought in the Battle of Britain were reservists that were mobilised and became full-time. What have you seen? How has your attitude towards reservists, part-time volunteer reserves, changed in your time as chief?
I have always been a fan of our volunteer reservists, and actually all of the different ways that people can contribute to the Royal Air Force, all of the different ways of options around reserve service. But I think there's a special place in my heart for part-time volunteer reserves who almost all juggle another career, another profession, but still find time to come and serve. And for them, the motivation, the willingness to serve, the desire to contribute alongside their regular counterparts is just magnificent to see. Now, we haven't always made it easy to mobilise our reserves, or even just give them the opportunity to use training days as an opportunity to deliver output. And that's something I've worked with the Commandant General Roxaf and the reserves team in the headquarters here to just knock down those doors and where we can open up the policy, open up the options, and actually really harness that potential and the potential of that group of people who are desperate to contribute, but don't always find the channel to do it is as easy as it should be. As I say, I'm a huge fan, and to my mind, it's an ever increasing part of the Royal Air Force whole force, and an ever increasing importance, particularly around some of the new sectors like cyber, like space, like data.
Are we closer to the zigzag career that you talked about last time we spoke?
We are closer. We haven't made progress as quickly as I would like. It is difficult. There are acts of Parliament involved, and other elements. But I think it is absolutely a common ambition now, I think, across large parts of defence, that's the direction we will go. We will make it easier for people to serve in different ways at different stages in their lives, and make it very easy to transition in a way that in some cases it isn't at the moment. But I am in no doubt that our reserves, under whatever description, whether it's auxiliaries, part-time or full-time, I have a huge amount to offer, and I say that with full confidence because I see where we have got it right, and we are utilising those skills. I see enormous benefits, and I see the regulars benefiting from the different perspectives, the diversity of thinking that our part-time reservists bring in, and we absolutely benefit from those skills. So it's something that it's It's a journey we're on. It hasn't necessarily gone as fast as I would like, but I look back over the last 4 years, and we have certainly made progress. And we have even in the headquarters here at High Wycombe, we have an entirely different conversation around reservists now. Air Vice Marshal Munro and all of the team are doing a superb job, right alongside their regular counterparts.
I guess it's an important aspect of contingency operations to be able to surge and create a workforce when needed.
Yeah, absolutely. It links us into society. It brings new skills. It brings a different way of thinking. It brings additional mass numbers of people when we need it. Why wouldn't you invest in your reserves would be the question. And as I say, in the past, we've made it more difficult than we need to utilise this amazing resource and this group of motivated, skilled people who are crying out to contribute. And why wouldn't we take advantage of that?
Now, I'm sure that not everything has gone how you would have liked it to have gone over the last 4 years. What have been your most challenging moments?
Yeah, I think the most challenging as chief is when there's decisions to be made and there's uncertainty and there's high risk, and particularly when it's high risk to people. And so I've mentioned it once or twice already. The evacuation from Kabul, op pitting, there was an awful lot of uncertainty. And there was significant risk, and we've seen some of the awards, the bravery awards that have been given subsequently, to realise what was at stake there. Losing a C-17 full of people would be horrific, and so those are really challenging periods when you're absolutely reliant on the skill of the people on the ground and the decisions they make. The other challenging area, again, uncertainty and risk, was around those early days and weeks of the pandemic, when there was a lot of uncertainty about what we were facing. But for me, the defence of the homeland, the continued operational output of the Royal Air Force, trumped that understandable caution and nervousness around what this disease meant and what it and the threat it faced. And so again, challenging period with the senior leadership team here in the headquarters to make sure that we kept recruiting, that we kept training, that we kept generating the force of the future at the same time as being as taking the precautions we needed to protect our people and their families. Again, a challenging time. And then I think we've had some strategic reviews, so the integrated review of defence and security and defence and development, foreign policy. That, as with any strategic review, is a period of jeopardy for a service, and it was important to make sure that we landed those really important messages around the utility of air power, the growing importance of space, and made sure that the Royal Air Force and the role of the Royal Air Force in protecting the nation was recognised, and that requires a lot of a lot of engagement across government to make sure that those messages land. And the third area that's been really challenging in my time is whenever we've been criticised in public. And clearly there was a period in the summer of 2022 when there were high-profile cases around behaviour, around our ability to train our people, particularly our aircrew, and around recruiting. And I think anybody, there's no one that wears our uniform that can have enjoyed that experience of that criticism in public. What was most frustrating for me during that period was that while all that public commentary and critical commentary was going on, the Royal Air Force was delivering a phenomenal operational output. Whether that was facing the Russian invasion of Ukraine, whether that was in the Middle East, deployed to the far side of the world, day in, day out, the Royal Air Force was delivering on operations, but none of that cut through when we were being criticised in the way we were.
As a leader, how do you lift your team around you, and the team extends across the globe, when faced with public criticism?
Well, ultimately it's about communication, but reminding our people of our phenomenal track record on operations, reminding our people of what we're here to do, protecting the nation, protecting our skies and space, keeping our laser-like focus on that, and at the same time explaining and addressing and correcting where we're criticised in public. When it comes to behaviours, reminding people that yes, there is a tiny minority whose standards have fallen below the values and standards of behaviour that we expect, but the vast majority of people, day in, day out, are doing an amazing job in the service of their country.
If you could wind back the clock 4 years, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Where we have made it harder for ourselves, it is almost inevitably because we haven't communicated enough. Whether it's communicated the rationale for doing something, or had conversations with people, or just reinforced the message as we're going on a certain course that we have elected to go on. Now, I have an excuse in that. Some of my time was during the lockdowns, where communication was more challenging. Certainly face-to-face communication was challenging. But nevertheless, all of the times over the last 4 years where I think we haven't been as slick as we should have been, as we have gone about, whether it's the business of running the Air Force or even on operational delivery, it's where we haven't communicated, and I haven't communicated, the senior leadership team hasn't communicated enough, and we have not, and so anybody in a position of leadership at whatever level of command or line management in the organisation, just remember that if you think you've communicated enough, then you probably need to go back and do it 10 times over again.
So would that be your advice, handover brief to the new Kaz?
It would be one of them. There will be many things. Whether he chooses to take my advice or not, that's entirely up to him. But it would be something that I would say to, as I say to anybody in the organisation. Communication really matters, and that partly reflects, for my generation in the sort of twilight weeks of my career. The people joining the Air Force today, some of the people listening to this, look at the world entirely differently. They think differently. They have different expectations, and part of that is around transparency and communication. And we need to have those conversations.
Which policy or direction of travel are you most proud of during your time as Kaz, and would hope to be your legacy? People will remember you for this. What is this?
I came in as chief in 2019, and I really wanted to energise the innovative gene in our Royal Air Force makeup, that hallmark of our history. The reason we came into being in 1918, that disruptive, technically innovative gene, which by and large we did through Astra. And I look back on what Astra is now achieving, some of the amazing new ways of working, the new equipment, the new ideas that are coming into service now, that have been as a result of people thinking about doing things differently, and most important of all, thinking about how they can contribute to building and playing their part in building the next generation Royal Air Force. I think it was something that we didn't talk about enough. I think we were utterly focused on the day-to-day delivery of operational output, which is good, But I demand that everybody takes responsibility in a part of their working days to think about what they're doing to build the Air Force of 2040, because we are fortunate today that our predecessors 20, 30 years ago got it right, and we have that obligation today to our successors in 20 or 30 years' time. So for me, that the thinking around next generation Royal Air Force, around what the Air Force of 2040 will be, and doing things today that will contribute to that is for me the thing I look back on, and I'm very pleased with the way that has gone. As part of that, we've got an Air Force which is now having a conversation around net zero. We've got an Air Force which has absolutely embraced the importance and the criticality of space going forward. We've got an Air Force which is thinking about data and AI and autonomous combat aircraft, autonomous platforms in a way that we weren't 3 or 4 years ago. And continuing that conversation, recognizing that our future and that the Air Force that our successors have to pick up and operate and fight with and win with is one that is fit for the future. So in all of that, I look back on that and think, those were the things that we got right. That was the tone. Those were exactly the right things to concentrate on, and we're seeing the benefits now. But I'll finish. I think where on the most fundamental point in all of that as well is that none of that innovation, none of that equipment, none of those amazing bits of technology that we're going to be operating in 20 years' time will be worth anything without the people and the quality and the talent of the people. And keeping an absolute focus on that, making sure that we recruit people from across the all corners of British society, that we are able to attract them, recruit them, and look after them and retain them into the future. That above all is what the Royal Air Force depends on, and that has got to be the highest priority of any leader in our organisation.
Finally, what's next? You join in the reserves?
I think I have a lifetime liability as a retired Air Chief Marshal. So I think by definition I'm probably automatically part of the reserves. But I don't honestly know what comes next. The transition. There will be elements of it that will be very strange. I've worn this uniform in one form or another since I was 13, and so it will be quite strange to be in a position when I'm getting up in the morning and not putting this uniform on. I've been that's over 40 years from air cadet through university cadet, officer cadet, and everything else. So I'm looking forward to what's next. I know that it will be different, but I know that I won't be leaving the Air Force either.
Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wigston, on behalf of the Royal Air Force, can I say thank you for your service and thank you for being on Inside Air.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
With Reheat for Inside Air, I'm AS1 Victoria Andrews. The 22nd Atlas A400M transport aircraft has touched down at RAF Bryce Norton, completing the delivery phase and rollout of this platform into service. Since entering service, the Atlas has been crucial to humanitarian operations, evacuations, and continues to support operations in the Middle East and NATO air policing in the Baltic region. The largest gathering of 5th generation stealth fighters has taken place in Alaska. Exercise Northern Edge saw 617 Squadron, the Dam Busters, operate the Lightning platform alongside their US and Australian counterparts in an environment that allows for complex training opportunities. OC 617 Squadron Wing Commander Stu Campbell describes the training environment.
To train to the highest level, you have to travel to the best training enablers. We're exercising at the pinnacle of combat air in the Western world. Here in Alaska, we have a huge amount of airspace we're working in, indeed over twice the length of the UK, which really allows us to test the 5th generation aircraft to the max extent they're capable of. Also here, we aren't as affected by air traffic control as we might be in the likes of Europe, so it really extends that range space available to us.
Involving 200 aircraft and 10,000 personnel, Northern Edge enabled the Royal Air Force to practice and develop the tactics, techniques and procedures essential to keeping 617 Squadron at the leading edge. Elsewhere, in another exercise, high readiness teams made up of personnel from engineering, logistics, force protection, air security, air movements, communications and medical have taken part in Exercise Auxilium Fort at RAF Wittering. Known collectively as Force Elements, the high readiness teams from the Global Enablement Organisation practiced responding to varied threats, including mortar attacks leading to a mass casualty incident, a multi-vehicle accident, and multiple attacks to their base and convoys. And lastly to sport, where the RAF team to compete in July's Inter-Services Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Championship has been selected. A 2-week camp at RAF Honington offered the team an opportunity to perfect their technique and learn new fighting skills. Meanwhile, service boxers have come out on top with a clean sweep of victories against their Royal Logistic Corps opponents. The 6 boxers had undertaken a rigorous 8-week training programme to prepare for the event at RAF Odium. And lastly, the UK Armed Forces Rugby League team are in a commanding position in the President's Cup competition. A 50-4 win over GB Police has set them up with games against GB teachers and England universities still to play. Head coach Chief Tech Gary Dunn praised the athletes' technical knowledge and ability. That's Reheat on Inside Air.
I'm AS1 Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That was the sound of a P-8 Poseidon. Boeing's Poseidon MRA-1 is a multi-role maritime patrol aircraft, equipped with sensors and weapon systems for anti-submarine warfare, as well as surveillance and search and rescue missions. The Poseidon features an array of cutting-edge technology: APY-10 radar with modes for high-resolution mapping, an acoustic sensor system, electronic support measures, and passive and multi-static sonobuoys. A special commemorative flypast took place on Tuesday the 23rd of May over Queen's Pier in Ramsey on the Isle of Man. The Poseidon from 201 Squadron, based at RAF Lossiemouth, marked the 80th anniversary of the Battle of the Atlantic, the longest military campaign of World War II. While the campaign started on the first day of the war, the commemorative events mark the point in May 1943, when enemy forces conceded they had been defeated in the Atlantic.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review, subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.